Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hi, good friends. Thanks for being here. Thank you for your practice. Yeah. Today we're going to talk about the 9 consciousnesses. The 9 consciousnesses were not fully developed conceptually until late Mahayana. The 9th consciousness, of course, being the Buddha consciousness, right? The Buddha, the experience of Buddha-ness. Yeah. And I'll mention just before we get started here, maybe I should go back to that. Somebody asked about Ichinen, and I have Ichinen Sanzen in the book, and there is a specific definition of Ichinen in Ichinen Sanzen, so I don't know if it's worth another. What I did was I elaborated a little bit on the definition of Ichinen in Ichinen Sanzen. So I hopefully, there was something interesting. The more I thought about it, I meditated and I chanted about it, and I come up with, one of the functions or one of the byproducts of this book, this Buddhism reference book, is the opportunity to demonstrate how all of these terms are pointing at the same thought experiment, the same dissection of the way the mind puts together our experience of life. And when it's ruled samsarically, everything about life is physical, and therefore it's possession, ownership, so on and so forth. But when you dig deeply, whether you do this through the sciences or through philosophy or Buddhism, certainly, that physicality starts to fall apart as a reality. It's an experiential reality, yes, absolutely, right? We all have bodies, but we all have sexual drives, food drives, shelter drives. We have these basic, and we call them survival, but that's kind of after the fact, in that we identify stuff that makes us feel secure, loved, right? We're trying to answer these cravings. And Buddhism says, well, let's look at where do those cravings, where do they come from? We're spending all our time trying to satiate them. Where do they come from? Can we intervene? Right? That's Buddhism. Now, tons and tons of sutras, stories, exploring these facets of the mind, like we talked about before, cutting a rectangle of skin off of your arm or your belly or whatever so you could take notes and remember the Buddhist teachings. That's hyperbolic, right? That's trying to push your mind to conceive further than the simple realm of where the cravings come from. What kind of dedication, what kind of mind power do we have? Because we're obviously just exercising it every day on accrual, getting stuff. But how much more power does the mind have? For instance, the skin thing. How much conviction, how much determination would you need that would quell or stop the formations of what we would call physical pain? Because the imperative of what you need is so much more important. What kind of shift of mind would that require, right? So Buddhism is all about this. And I've talked many times on the 3,000 realms. We have that in this book. We're going to talk about it again. And in Ichinen Sanzen is Nichiren's Japanese interpretation of the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment of life. But let's take that apart just for a moment. Okay? A moment. Good one, Sylvain. So in the part of Ichinen Sanzen where it defines Ichinen, it says Ichinen means a moment of life. There we are again, right back at the 3,000 realms, right? What's important about Ichinen to understand is Ichinen is a moment of life and Sanzen is 3,000. So Nichiren puts them together as a shorthand, right? To understand that in each moment, which, as we know, you can look up moment in the book, incredibly small, there's all these influences, and 3,000 is not an actual number, but it's a referential number because it contains the 10 factors, the three not realms of existence. It has all these multipliers. And the point isn't 3,000. The point is the vast number of influences, choices, so on and so forth, in each of those tiny, tiny discrete moments that influence how our potential will manifest. It's important to understand this because the misinterpretation of Ichinen is that it's somehow our volition, our will, our determined commitment, right? All of those words are good, but they're not Ichinen. Ichinen is affected by each of those words. So in popular usage, let me go ahead and finish what I wrote here. Ichi means one and signifies the one ultimate truth or the middle way of the Dharma nature. We read that all the time. But what is that code for? A single moment of existence encompasses all the elements that form a common mortal's life, such as body, mind, and cause-effect. But understand that that includes also the 10 factors and all the components of the 3,000 realms. So for our modern usage, this term relates directly to formations. That's your equation there. Ichinen is about formations. And from the very get-go, Shakyamuni taught about ceasing the formations of the cravings, right? To get away from our attachments, our clinging, our suffering. So Ichinen is about the formations of what? Karma. So when we talk about chanting to affect or effect our Ichinen, we're stating the obvious. We're saying that when we chant, we invoke our Buddha mind. And when we invoke our Buddha mind, we influence the very formations moment to moment of our life, our karma. Make sense? So what else did I say? The formations of the 3,000 realms are the formula of influences to potential instantiations that form karma. Sanzen includes every single potential phenomenon in the entire universe in each of those moments. See moment. Okay? So the definition of Ichinen is in the book. And I don't think to say that again in another section, I don't know. Hey, let me know what you think. If you think I should individuate that, because many of us, myself included, through organizations we were members of and started our regular practice of Nichiren's doctrine, we've been pushed different versions and misunderstandings of what Ichinen is, let alone the whole idea of formations and karma, right? So they all go hand in hand, and that is very much a byproduct of this book, which I'm enjoying. To me, it's a reinvestigation of everything I've studied for over 40 years. It solidifies, again, my confidence in my practice that for all of the terms and terminologies and stories and years of scholarship and decades and centuries of scholarship, the truth has never changed. It's always been the same. The challenge of Buddhism is remaining aware. And so here we are at the 9 consciousnesses, looking at this, quote, problem from yet another perspective. And what do we already know about the 9 consciousnesses when we studied the Nidana? That was the initial, the foray into the workings of the mind, right? Which later get dissected into the skandhas, right? And everything's about the sita, the moment of perception, yeah? And how that is colored each and every single thought moment, right? They all just interpenetrate. So, I have 4 associations with the 9 consciousness here. We'll start with the first 9 differing aspects of the sentient mind for managing and correlating sensory input as well as epistemological reasoning to ascribe valuations and identification of physical and mental experiences. That's a long sentence. There's a lot going on in there. And it should also say see epistemology, because there is a section in this book describing epistemology. It's an interesting word to begin with, but conceptually, it points exactly to what Buddhism is doing, dissecting the way things come about. In this case, our thoughts, our beliefs, our backlog of what we would normally call memories, right? But in Buddhism, we understand that those memories are just constructs of the mind built of tendencies and conditions, karma, a backlog of influences, right? Modern psychology thinks of everything as newly invented. But as Buddhists, we understand that there's nothing newly invented. That's a myth. That's what our permanentizing is about, right? Our thingifying. What we understand as Buddhists is that all these are apparitions. They're momentary, temporary instantiations of potential that we're hanging on to or reviewing, right? It's not that they're not real. We just understand what reality they represent, what they are versus what they are being. Number 2, senses and mental processes see consciousness. I have an entry in the book on consciousness that will go into that more deeply. Third, the mental properties emergent from our physical biology. How does this mind exist? What is it doing? How does it relate to the body, the brain, the eyes, the mouth, the vocal cords, on and on and on, right? And fourth, the samsaric link to Buddha-ness. Now that's a short sentence, but it's packed full of insight, right? It's our samsaric link to Buddha-ness. How is it a link? Well, samsara, the physical universe, as we perceive it in mind, and it's important to remember that too. This is not samsara. This is a book, but my perception of it as a book, what I think of when the word book goes through my mind, the way I conceive, construct, and understand book, that's samsara. And perhaps even more to the point, because I've collected all that data about book, I'm clinging to that data. I'm identifying with that data. I know what that book is because that book is not me, and I am not that book. But together, we have a relationship, and I possess that relationship. I own it. I cling to it. That's attachment. That's samsara. Follow? But in that huge construction of being, identification, I emerge a sentient mind, an amazing witness to the process of being. That's how I think I am. That's my ego. But I can use that ego, that thought of who I think I am, as I construct myself every moment to moment to moment to moment, and I can transmigrate. I can remove myself from all of these attachments while still existing, samsara, but shift my witness to observe rather than being in the midst of this entire process. Myself, quote unquote, my ego, quote unquote, as a tiny little spark of light amongst a huge, unfathomable cloud of little sparks. Oh, I'm just one little spark in this process of life, of formations, of Ichinen Sanzen. That consciousness, that yeah, I'm reminded of a line from The Matrix of all movies, that all-seeing eye, the Gohanzon eye. Well, we wouldn't be able to open that eye had we not an eye to open. Samsara then is our link to Buddha-ness. This is why when your samsaric mind is extinct, no more Buddha-ness. Because Buddha-ness is an experience. It's not a thing. So, those are the four associations I'm making with the nine consciousnesses, and that answers a lot about the nine consciousnesses. But let's go ahead and dive into it a little more deeply. We've got plenty of time. Excuse me. There are nine consciousnesses, as shown in the diagram that follows. There's a diagram that you'll see in the book. It's also available online, threefoldlotus.com, right? Nine kinds of discernment. Again, keep reminding yourself 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. I like the term Ichinen Sanzen, but those terms, those words have so much charisma about them, they don't dissect what's going on. Unless you can make that association, maybe you can. I have trouble with it. I would rather use the actual 3,000 realms in a single thought moment because the math in it is attractive to me. It reminds me of the discriminations, what's going on here in each moment. Whereas Ichinen Sanzen, nice label, but I think of it, more generally. They're the same thing. I'm just expressing my predilections. So 9 kinds of discernment. Consciousness, quote unquote, is the translation of the Sanskrit vijnana or vijnana, which means discernment. The 9 consciousnesses are as follows, and as I list these consciousnesses, you'll have a better idea of what discernment is. What are we discerning? What mechanism is my mind, brain working together discerning, right? What is discernment? Identifying differences, right? This, not that, not those. Discernment. This is one of those, but it's different than all the others. It itself has a distinctive character that is not the same as those, or all of those are slightly discernment. So discernment, when it comes to our Buddhist investigation of the mind, because that's what Buddhism is about, 1, sight. Notice I said sight, not vision, not eye, sight. Sanskrit, chakshur vijnana, the chakshur vijnana. Because, as is normal in Buddhism, we don't just say eye. We say sight because sight includes the eye, the retina, the optic nerve, the signals to a certain part of the brain's dissection of those signals, its associations with previous discernments to collectively create a picture, a contextual picture, a way of interacting with, in the mind, what all of that sensory input is being in that moment. How fast do those electrons travel? Yeah. Same thing goes for hearing, smell, touch, the mind, which they show as two aspects, the mano vijnana. There's two aspects of mind in the nine consciousnesses, and if you'll remember from the Nidana, that's well described. The eighth is the alaya consciousness, or the vijnana, and the ninth, the amala consciousness, or amala vijnana. Note that the Sanskrit is the same for both the sixth and seventh consciousnesses. You can read about that in the Nidana as well. The first five consciousnesses correspond to the five senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Those are pretty obvious, yeah? The sixth consciousness integrates the perceptions of the five senses into coherent images and makes judgments about the external world, right? This is where we're classifying. Now we're entering the region of, is this the brain entirely, or is this the brain with the emergent mind forming generalizations, opinions, specific opinions, right? With all our emotive states and constantly changing states. Is this all happening in the brain? Is this all chemistry and biology? Or is this part of this emergent quality of mind that is kind of a hovering over that electromagnetism and its activities in the brain? It's pretty fascinating stuff. Get into neurosciences and all of that. Where does the brain end and the mind begin? Not sure, but we're not done yet. In contrast with the first six consciousnesses, which deal with the external world, samsara, the seventh, or mano consciousness, corresponds to the inner, spiritual, if you will, world. Awareness of the and attachment to the self are said to originate from the mano consciousness. Exists in what is, as does the ability to distinguish between what we would say good and evil, right? Or good and bad. The eighth, or alaya consciousness, exists in what modern psychology calls the unconscious or subconscious. All experiences of present and previous lifetime moments, collectively called karma, are stored there. Now, maybe I should reword that because I'm not sure that's clear enough. But let's go back to mano for just one moment. So you see there's an aspect of the mind identified in Buddhism as cataloging everything for self-perception. What do I experience with these things? But there's also the aspect at the same time, a separate aspect of discrimination that takes in, okay, this means this to me, but how is it perceived in the world? How does my perception of it differ or agree with how it's perceived in the world? And how will I, self, there's that identification trick in there. How will I be perceived as somebody who thinks this in relation to others who have their own thoughts about this? Right? From this comes, we talk about I'm going to throw in another one, the 10 realms, 10 worlds. Do we feel strongly about how we feel about this thing we've defined so that we will endeavor to sway the opinions of others toward our definition of what we think this is? Isn't that, you see how all of this works into the fabric of life, society, self and other, right? The world of anger, the world of animality, they're all investigations about how this assemblage is going and what we're doing with it, albeit changing moment to moment. Because all it takes is one momentary thing to happen, and your opinions about many things, poof, they evaporate and become something else completely. How do we do that? Buddhism isn't so much concerned with how we change our opinions, just noting that, you see, it's all ephemeral. It's all constructed in our mind. But when we tenaciously hang on to opinions, we're no longer being reasonable. Because what we're hanging on to is what? Attachment, clinging to something that's no longer happening. Look at it now and see if you think the same way. Probably not. But that's not how we typically live our lives. That's not how we're trained to live our lives, is it? So the alaya consciousness receives the results of one's good or evil influences or karma repercussions in this world. And we've talked about repercussions, right? And from the pre-birth energies collected to manifest you since beginningless time, see time, and stores them as karmic potentials or tendencies, which then produce the reward experience of happiness, detachment, and awakening or stress, anxiety according to our current mind state, so on. Hence, it was rendered as the storehouse consciousness in Chinese. The alaya consciousness thus forms the framework of individual existence. So the alaya consciousness is identified as the discrimination database. Remember I talk about the database, the warehouse of karma? So we've identified two different aspects of karma here, but it's really the same thing. We start out as we manifest as a human form with a tremendous, unfathomable amalgam of karma. But the moment we individuate into the womb, we're collecting new experiences. We're forming our experiences, our identity, with all of that karma in relation to this samsaric world. And now we're individuating. We're not creating new karma. We're influencing and coloring and playing with the formations of the entire karma from which we're instantiated. But moment to moment, we're influencing or submitting to the cause effects that we make, affecting that karma. That's why there are repercussions from actions we've taken to affect that huge, what do they call it, bullet train of energy? It's fortunate that we can do that, and that's that very mechanism we identify in Buddhism as our opportunity to modify it, to get those aspects of tendencies and conditions that would create obstacles in our full experience of our potential in samsara via our clear-headed observational mind of Buddha-ness. And even though it may not be apparent, conscious to us as we're doing it or affecting it, we will experience the affect of it in our lives. All because of this mechanism, yeah? The Dharma characteristics, Chin Fashiang, Japanese Hosso school, regards the eight consciousnesses as the eighth consciousness as the source of all spiritual or internal and physical phenomena. The summary of the Mahayana Shilun or Chandran school, the Tendai school, and the flower garland Huayan or Qigong school postulate a ninth consciousness called the Amala consciousness, which lies below or beneath or around the alaya consciousness and remains free from all karmic impurity. In other words, it's not affected by the bullet train because it's outside of the bullet train, looking upon it, your bullet train, my bullet train, the guitar's bullet train, the sky's bullet train, the earth's bullet train, the universe bullet train. Whoa. Now there's an amalgam, right? Immeasurable. Which lies below the alaya consciousness remains free. This ninth consciousness is defined as the basis of all life's functions. See the engine of life. Another word we can associate with Ichinen. Certainly the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. We're identifying this minute moment of, you could call it creation. To our samsaric being, that word, I don't like it because it's overused and associated with so many derisions in the world. Rather not use it. Engine of life, that works for me. Hence, it was rendered as, quote, fundamental pure consciousness. It's the observer instead of the watcher inside the process with all the vicissitudes of the process, looking this way and that, trying to just stay head above water. The observer can monitor the whole process and the nature of the process. Yikes, much bigger than any of the other 8 consciousness, which are busy in the midst of negotiating. This is the storehouse of our inherent Buddha nature and our door to the ultimate truth of unattached experience, because that's what it is. When invoked, this ninth consciousness wraps and embraces all the other 8 consciousnesses to render all of them this new, quote, lens of experience fully realized and present. Restating the obvious. Where are we time-wise? Well, I should probably wrap it up. Should we do another long one? I hate breaking these up because it's a train of thought, right? Let's just go on. In the following diagram, the consciousnesses are rendered as circles or as a section through the spheres of consciousness, with the most worldly on the outermost sphere moving toward the center or innermost sphere of, quote, pure awareness or enlightened consciousness of, what would you say that the name of that enlightened consciousness is? Well, we've called it Buddha. We've called it Buddhaness. We've called it the Amala consciousness. Well, let's go ahead and call it by what we modern practitioners of Buddhism understand it to be. Myoho Renge Kyo. And for our samsaric link to that Myoho Renge Kyo, we call it Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Another reason why Namu is so important and why Nichiren created that link. Namu samsaric Myoho Renge Kyo, the engine of life. It's in our very Daimoku that we establish the link from samsara to Buddhaness. That we take our ninth consciousness and wrap it around all the other 8 and all of the other 8s and observe the process not just personally, but in its entirety. You see how massive that is? By invoking the Daimoku while focusing on the ultimate mandala of the Gohonzon in our samsaric reality, we invoke a cause of awakening in the three aspects of the Buddha, the law Dharma, Myoho Renge-kyo, the wisdom, the Dharma body, brain, mind, and the universe, and the action Dharma voice, right? The voice is Buddha. The Dharma voice that work their way through the consciousnesses of sight, purifying vision, hearing, purifying listening, smell, purifying odors, that's why we have incense, touch, purifying the flesh, the sensation, mind, purifying thoughts. Again, this is why you shouldn't be preoccupied with thoughts when you start chanting Daimoku. You're purifying thoughts, so why would you force thoughts into it? Just let the thoughts be there, because as you chant, those monkeys will shut up. They'll get out of the way. If you focus on Myoho, and as you're chanting, all of those thoughts and desires and cravings that you think you're supposed to be thinking about, you'll push them away, because they're obstacles. You're going to penetrate right through them. So don't worry about that. Just single-mindedly chant to see Buddha. Just as Nichiren exhorts us to. Hearing, purifying listening, smell, purifying odors, touch, purifying the flesh, mind, purifying thoughts, mano, purifying causal tendencies, and self-perception of innate Buddha nature. Alaya consciousness, purifying causal heredity. And then, ultimately, with direct association, the Amala consciousness as the realized aspect of the Gohonzon, creating a continuity without time or space and the true aspect of the persistent continuity of life. See momentum. Buddhahood. See the diagram for a graphic illustration. Because the Daimoku reaches to the core of the Amala consciousness immediately, the intermediate 8 consciousnesses are purified or cleansed of defilements without impedance whatsoever. Now, if you'll look at the video, search for Wu Ji to you and me, I used a triangle instead of circles. Same concept, same dialogue, but it'll be another way for you to perceive this process, right? Not that there's no test on this. This is all to help you understand the mechanism of the Lotus method. Let's go ahead and finish this up here. Daimoku Mandala of Gohonzon together, active meditation. This is why the Daimoku and the Mandala of Gohonzon together in the active meditation of the Lotus Sutra, the singing, and Nichiren doctrine are the most expedient means of the Buddhist practice to achieve enlightenment in this lifetime, moment to moment. There it is. Once again. In fact, the state achieved during the invocation of the Daimoku while focused on the Mandala of Gohonzon, done with determination, as in the statement earlier, quote, single-mindedly desiring to meet the Buddha, end quote, immediately produces the mind of Buddha. Why would you focus on anything else? Immediately produces the mind of the Buddha. The objective of practice is to attain and maintain this Buddha mind as long as possible, and to maintain it beyond the meditation, to keep it while in one's daily activities. So while one performs the practice of recitation of the Gongyo, 2 chapters of the Lotus Sutra, the Hoben and the Juryo, one instantly enters the Buddha mind and concomitantly affects all 8 consciousnesses to purify them. Over time, with regular practice, as the 8 consciousnesses are continuously cleansed, the innate core of Buddha nature is more and more able to be maintained throughout all the consciousnesses, and therefore achieving the maintained state of awakening in one's current life. Bodhisattva, yeah. And then there's this diagram. It's just these circles named for each of the levels of consciousness, and a little arrow showing how active meditation with Daimoku and Gohonzon burst through all of them to the central core, the Amala, the Buddha-ness, yeah? And that's it. It's a lot of words, but that's what this book is. It's a lot of words and terms to be able to come to terms with, one, understanding what we're doing when we're chanting, and really a proof, an experiential proof, not a mathematical proof, not a, I bought all the equipment, now let's hear how it works, or sound, right? It's a deep dive into how we think and why we think and how we can affect our thinking, all in service of living a more appreciative, loving, amazing life, instead of, as samsara would have us think, chasing after something we don't understand or know, spending our whole life running to achieve something we already have. That's Buddhism, my friends. Go ahead, enjoy a little jog and a run every now and again, but come back to, isn't this moment amazing? This moment, this moment, this moment, this moment. Look at all these moments. Look at life. It's very calming. It's very profound. And as one of many, 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 many sparks, one is left simply with the desire to embrace and watch the expression of all of them. It's an expansive experience. Running and chasing after an unknown promise is not expansive at all. It's very constrictive. The pressure we feel, right? We don't need that pressure. It's made up. It's constructed. Release that pressure. Experience the totality that you are right now. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your practice. Please be kind to yourself, right? Take care of your health. That will enable you to be kind to others without even trying, right? If you have a second, please like and subscribe. It's a Bodhisattva act that helps grow our Sangha. If they're helpful to you, threefoldlotus.com, lots of free study material there, links to the ebooks and the regular books, or go to lulu.com. A lot of the ebooks, though, that are on threefoldlotus.com are not listed on lulu.com. I've been trying to keep them separate, but it's a mix. I apologize if that's confusing. I say that because I've actually gotten email from people who go, why are there two different prices for the same book? Well, if you look a little more carefully, you'll see that one's an ebook and one's a printed book, right? But anyway, I digress. Get yourself a digital reproduction of an actual Nichiren inscribed mandala, right? Don't let that be an obstacle. In the meantime, I will put together, the next one should be an interesting, I don't have that much on it. It's not that crazy of a term. I might investigate it a little more. We'll talk about nirvana. Again, not particularly important to our modern day practice of Nichiren's doctrine of the Lotus Sutra method, Shakyamuni's enlightenment. But we're going to hear it all the time as we study, so we might as well have some reference material just so to go back to, oh yeah, that's what that means. So that's what this is for. All right, enough blah, blah, blah. I always enjoy our time together. I feel you even through the internet waves of connection. I truly do. It's just part of our practice, isn't it? Our Sangha. So again, with great appreciation, I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.